Hi, my name's Nolan and I'm a psychology teacher at Queen Elizabeth Sixth Form College, and today I'm going to talk you through our PowerPoint on content analysis. But before we start, what we'd like you to do is to write your own Lonely Heart advert. These are from newspapers. Years ago, when people wanted to meet a romantic partner, they would write a short paragraph in the newspaper describing themselves and asking what they were looking for. So what we'd like you to do is just take a minute or so just to write one about yourself, or at least for somebody who's the same gender as you. So, and I'm a psychology teacher at Queen Elizabeth Sixth Form College, and today I'm going to talk you through our PowerPoint on content analysis. But before we start, what we'd like you to do is to write your own Lonely Heart advert. These are from newspapers. Years ago, when people wanted to meet a romantic partner, they would write a short paragraph in the newspaper describing themselves and asking what they were looking for. So what we'd like you to do is just take a minute or so just to write one about yourself, or at least for somebody who's the same gender as you. By the end of this online lesson today, you should be able to describe what is content analysis, be able to describe at least 4 of the main features of content analysis. Really, all students should be able to at least provide one strength and one limitation with some explanation. Most of you, though, 2 is fine, 2 strengths, 2 limitations. However, if you're really ambitious, let's see if you can identify 3 strengths and 2 limitations of content analysis. So, content analysis, what is it used for? It's used to analyse content, as it says, but the content of descriptive data. So, if you are looking at advertisements, or if you're looking at people's journals, or if you're looking at transcripts from an interview, you're able to take that information and be able to identify what is going on in the content so you can make some conclusions. Therefore, what we are trying to do is to take something that is descriptive or an item, which is qualitative in nature, and by looking at the content of it, turning it into quantitative data. Now, content analysis doesn't always provide quantitative data, but that is its main purpose and what it's usually used for. As can be seen, our definition of content analysis is it's an indirect observation of an artifact such as an interview, magazine article or diary. This involves changing qualitative data into quantitative data by identifying themes. Now, what we mean by an artifact is something that has been created by a person, something that is a result of either their thinking, their experience or action. So it could actually be a piece of art, it could be their account of an experience, anything there. Generally, these things are done as part of natural day of living, such as a magazine article was written for the magazine readership, not for the psychologist. So if I was to write an answer in the exam where they were asking for the main features of content analysis, I would identify that it's an indirect observation of an artifact, meaning that the artifact had been created, then the psychologist went and looked at that. Now, content analysis is used for interviews and for the reports of what people have said in an interview. And the researcher doing the content analysis might be the person who did the interview. However, it's indirect because they are analysing the data after the interview has taken place and the transcript is written up. So it's indirect. It involves coding categories, meaning breaking down what they are reading or seeing into categories and giving each one a code. This might be themes as well, or it might mean actually evaluating those themes. Then what they do is they then will turn this into quantitative data by counting how often those codes or how strong those themes are occurring. This therefore produces quantitative data, but instead of counting, they might also describe that and therefore present qualitative data. The artifacts are usually sampled through opportunity. So if you are looking at television adverts, or if you're looking at news articles, they will just pick out the first ones that come along rather than any kind of stratified sampling technique. So how do we carry out content analysis? Well, the first thing you need to do is the sampling stage. Sampling isn't about the participants, it's about the artifacts that you are analysing. You need to make a decision as to what it is you're going to look at, whether that's television adverts or whether it's news articles or whether it is poetry from World War I. You decide what it is you're going to look at, and then you collect those artifacts to look at. Your sampling does not refer to participants, but rather the item that you are being analysed. So this could actually be the recordings from an interview, and that might be your material that you are sampling. Once the artifacts have been sampled, then the researcher needs to familiarise themselves with it. They need to carry out some pilot studies. That means dry runs, looking through the artifacts in order so they can become familiar to identify the categories and codes that they need to put in place. Once you've become familiar with the artifacts, then you have to identify the themes. Once the main themes have been identified, then you code each of the themes to create these categories. So for instance, if I was looking at advertisements and gender stereotyping, I might identify the adverts that I want, the artifacts. Then I will look through them and say, right, okay, I can see the kind of themes that are going on here. Then I would code those themes. So for instance, it might be people representing domestic tasks that they're involved in. It could be that comical tasks. It could be that there is some kind of practical work that's going on. So once I've identified these themes, I would create a code for each. So therefore I could then count how often this is going on, particularly if I was looking at the differences between males and females. Once I have created my coding system, I then just count them. So I will count how often each of the codes occur. Sometimes that might be a rating scale. So you might rate how often or how strong a particular category or coding or theme is occurring in your artifact. Once I have counted then my codes or my themes, I can then compare. So for instance, if I was looking at the differences between males and female representation in adverts on television, I have then counted how many times women may be in a domestic role and how many times men are. And then I can compare the two to see if females are more likely to be represented in a domestic role in advertisements than men. Working through this slide, you should be able to review then how to carry out content analysis. Note that content analysis is typically used to identify quantitative data by tallying up the occurrence of the codes. However, you can still get qualitative data such as examples of quotes in content, which is descriptive. On this slide, we're going to think about how we look at different factors and what content we could analyse. So just take a minute, scratch your head, put your thinking cap on and think about what could you look at for these different scenarios. So for instance, the first one, it says you want to find out about what is important to 5-year-olds. Well, you could do this by getting them to draw pictures, assuming that what they are drawing is important to them, looking at whether they drew family or items, or you could interview them and ask them what's important to them, and then you could then analyse their answers once the interview has finished. So take some time and think about what content you could analyse for each of these scenarios. We are now going to do a little bit of content analysis of our own. Some psychological theorists suggest that men and women seek different characteristics in a romantic partner, and they do this for evolutionary reasons. They look for different things in a member of the opposite sex. That females, because they're the ones that have children, will look for stability, strength and resources when looking for a male. This is in order for them to be provided for and their offspring. Whereas males may look more for physical attractiveness or youth or other indicators of a female's facility and ability to bring up and nurture strong, healthy children. One way to investigate if there are differences between males and females and what they look for in a partner was suggested by someone called Dunbar, who looked at Lonely Hearts columns in newspapers to see what males and females were looking for in a partner and the characteristics and attributes that they were offering in their place. Can you please turn to the Learning Through Doing content analysis activity, which is in the Methodologies Non-Experimental activity booklet. In this, we're going to investigate whether Dunbar's findings were correct and that males and females do look for different characteristics in a romantic partner. If you follow through the instructions on the task, have a look at the Lonely Hearts activities on the other side and identify how you can carry out content analysis and record your findings. If you do not have a booklet, I will put a copy on this post in Google Classroom. What did you find? Did your results support the idea? Can evolutionary approach really explain the differences between the characteristics that males and females seek in a romantic partner? Now we're going to evaluate the use of content analysis. Firstly, content analysis has high ecological validity. This is because generally you are looking at real life artifacts, either advertisements that were written for the purpose of advertising, not for doing psychological research, or people's diaries or journals where they were writing not for psychologists. So therefore it's about real life events that are going on, thus high ecological validity. Generally, content analysis does not suffer from demand characteristics because the people who are creating the artifacts do not know that they're part of psychological research. They're just creating an advert or they're just writing a newspaper article. So they're not changed in order to meet the demands of the research. Research using content analysis is seen to have high reliability. This is because the themes, categories and coding systems can be the same across the different groups or artifacts that they're looking at, therefore keeping consistency. But also they can be repeated easily, therefore establishing external reliability. However, one of the main limitations of content analysis is that they are subjective, meaning that the researcher has to make an interpretation. And by making an interpretation, they may be biased in what they're interpreting, therefore having an influence on the internal validity. Another limitation is establishing cause and effect. They are just descriptive. Although you may find gender differences between the way males and females are represented in advertisements, we can't establish cause and effect on this. Just that is what is happening. So unlike an experiment in a laboratory where an independent variable is clearly manipulated and then a dependent variable measured, we are just describing the differences between two categories or groups. Here's a possible exam question on evaluating the use of content analysis. It seems very straightforward and is out of 6 marks. Now, because it's out of 6 marks, you know that it's not going to be just a short answer. If it asks for evaluate one use of content analysis, then you would put 1 sentence in. If it asks for 2, you'd put 2 in. But for 6 marks, it's really looking for 2 paragraphs roundabout, 2 short paragraphs. Meaning that you would present to get a pass at least 1 strength and 1 weakness, but to get a high mark, including 6 marks, you really need to be presenting and explaining 2 strengths and 2 weaknesses. It is 6 marks, so it doesn't require a conclusion. However, you may still want to put 1 in just to try and ensure that you get the full marks for this answer. Here is a writing frame that could be used for the question on the previous slide. What we'd like you to do now is get a piece of paper and write the answer out as if you're answering the question, filling in the gaps. If you find it difficult to fill in the gaps, that really is a good thing because you'll have to think it through and that will progress and help your learning. Once you have filled it in to the best that you can, click on the blue speaker icon on the bottom right hand side of the page and then you will find the answers. The strength of using content analysis is that it is high in ecological validity because they use real-life artifacts or real-life communications. Therefore, the findings can be generalized beyond the study, increasing the external validity. However, content analysis only describes data. Therefore, it is difficult to establish cause and effect relationships. A weakness is that they are prone to observer researcher bias and subjectivity, as a researcher may make judgments that support their own hypotheses, reducing the internal validity of content analysis. However, they are high in reliability because coding systems are easily repeated. If the findings are consistent after repeating, then we know we have external reliability. Overall, content analysis are high in external validity and external reliability. However, they may not actually explain behaviour and could be affected by subjectivity, meaning they lack internal validity. So in this lesson, what have we done? We have gone through what content analysis is, looked at the features of it, looked at 5 evaluation points, and also looked at an exam question. What I'd like you to do now is get a piece of paper out, see if you can answer the 3 questions below. You can check those against page 26 in your green booklet. Once you've done that, have a go at the exam questions on Google Classroom. Here's a psychology joke. Why did Cleopatra not go to the psychiatrist? Because she was the queen of denial. Yeah.